Imagine you're living in the 9th century. You are an alchemist in Tang Dynasty China. You're not looking for a way to kill people. In fact, you're looking for the exact opposite. You want to live forever. You're obsessed with the elixir of immortality. You've spent years mixing herbs, minerals, and strange concoctions. One afternoon, you decide to try something new. You take some honey, some sulfur, and some saltpeter, a white, salty powder you found on the floor of a cave. You heat them up. You're expecting a potion that will grant you eternal life. Instead, you get an explosion that burns your eyebrows off and levels half your laboratory. This is the great irony of human history. The most destructive substance the world would ever know wasn't invented by a general or a conqueror. It was invented by a man trying to defeat death. But here's the thing about the fire drug, as they called it back then. Nobody knew what to do with it at first. For decades, gunpowder was basically a party trick. Imagine being at a royal court and seeing someone throw a handful of this powder into a fire. Asterisk flash. Bang. Asterisk. The emperor is impressed. The ladies in waiting are startled. It's magic. It's alchemy. It's useless? Well, not for long. Because humans are, if nothing else, very creative when it comes to finding ways to scare each other. The first weapons weren't cannons or guns. They were fire arrows. Basically, they tied a little tube of gunpowder to an arrow, lit a fuse, and shot it. Imagine being a soldier on the other side of that. You're used to the sound of wind, the clatter of horses, and the occasional shout. Suddenly, the sky is filled with screaming, hissing streaks of fire that explode when they land. It didn't matter if the arrow actually hit you. The sound was enough to make your horse lose its mind and your heart stop. This was the transition from the physical to the psychological. Gunpowder didn't just break bones. It broke the human spirit. And yet, it was still incredibly unstable. If you got the mixture wrong, it wouldn't explode. It would just fizzle out like a sad firework. If you got it too right, it would blow up in your face before you could even launch it. It was a volatile, temperamental demon that the world was just beginning to learn how to bottle. In these early days, the ingredients were the biggest hurdle. Saltpeter, the soul of gunpowder, wasn't exactly easy to come by. It's essentially crystallized nitrogen. Where do you find it? In the most disgusting places imaginable. Ancient gunpowder recipes often involved harvesting the white crust that formed on the walls of toilets and stables. Yes, the substance that built the British Empire and conquered the Americas literally started as fermented waste. By the time we reach the end of the 10th century, the secret is out. The fire drug isn't a medicine anymore. It's becoming an industry. The Chinese government starts banning the sale of saltpeter to foreigners. They realize they've accidentally stumbled onto the ultimate unfair advantage. But secrets like this have a way of traveling. They travel along the Silk Road, hidden in the packs of merchants. They travel through the minds of spies. And as that secret moves west, it's going to encounter a world that is still stuck in the age of knights and stone castles. A world that has absolutely no idea that its walls are about to become obsolete. Imagine you are a Mongol cavalryman in the 1200s. You belong to the most disciplined, feared military force the world has ever seen. You've conquered across the steppes, you've mastered the bow, and you believe that nothing can stop your charge. Then, you reach the gates of a Song Dynasty city in China. As you gallop toward the walls, you expect the usual. A rain of wooden arrows, maybe some boiling oil. But instead, the sky screams. Long, hissing streaks of smoke tear through the air, trailing sparks like miniature dragons. These aren't just arrows. They are fire arrows. They don't just pierce. They explode. When they land near your horse, the sound is like a thunderclap right next to your ear. Your horse, a creature of instinct, doesn't care about your military discipline. Panics. The entire formation breaks, not because of a physical wall, but because of a sound and a smell that shouldn't exist in nature. This was the dragon's phase of gunpowder. It wasn't about precision yet. It was about pure, unadulterated terror. For the Chinese engineers of the 12th and 13th centuries, gunpowder was becoming a craft of the macabre. They started getting creative. They built fire lances, essentially bamboo tubes filled with gunpowder and shrapnel, like broken porcelain or scrap metal, attached to the end of a spear. Picture the scene. A soldier holds a spear, but instead of just poking at you, he pulls a string, and the spear vomits a 3-foot flame and a spray of jagged metal directly into your face. It was the world's first flamethrower and shotgun rolled into one. It was terrifying, it was messy, and it changed the vibe of a battlefield forever. Before this, war was cleaner. It was muscle against muscle, steel against steel. There was a certain predictability to it. Gunpowder introduced the chaos factor. For the first time, a peasant with a bamboo tube could take down a knight who had trained since childhood. The human element of bravery was starting to be overshadowed by the mechanical element of chemistry. But here's the crazy part. The Mongols, despite being the ones being blown up at first, did what they always did. They adapted. They didn't just run away from the fire drug. They captured the engineers who made it. Suddenly, the secret of gunpowder wasn't just confined to the laboratories of China. It was on the move, carried by the Mongol war machine across the Silk Road. As they swept into the Middle East and toward the borders of Europe, they brought the dragon with them. In Islamic lands, chemists began to refine the recipe even further. They realized that the white salt, saltpeter, needed to be purified to get a bigger bang. They started calling it Chinese snow or Chinese salt. They treated it like a rare spice, but instead of seasoning food, they were seasoning the end of empires. By the mid-1200s, we start seeing descriptions of thunderpots, iron containers filled with powder that were hurled over walls. It was the birth of the grenade. Imagine being a city guard, looking down at a small iron pot smoking at your feet. You've never seen an explosion in your life. You have no concept of combustion. To you, it looks like magic. It looks like the wrath of God in a metal jar. But as effective as these weapons were, they were still soft. Bamboo tubes crack. Iron pots are heavy to throw. The dragon was out of the bag, but it didn't have its teeth yet. To truly change history, gunpowder needed a house. It needed something stronger than bamboo and more reliable than a hand-thrown pot. It needed the forge. While the East was perfecting the powder, the West, specifically the metalworkers of Europe who had spent centuries making bells for churches and armor for knights, was about to provide the metal. When the chemistry of the East met the metallurgy of the West, the fire arrow would grow up into something much more permanent. The age of the dragon was ending, and the age of the cannon was about to begin. For over 1,000 years, if you wanted to feel safe, you went to Constantinople. The city was a legend. Its walls, the Theodosian walls, were the greatest feat of engineering in the medieval world. They were 3 layers deep, 20 feet thick, and 70 feet high. For 10 centuries, every unstoppable army that arrived at those gates, from the Huns to the Vikings, simply looked up, realized they couldn't get in, and eventually went home. In 1453, the walls were still there, but the world had changed. A 21-year-old sultan named Mehmed II arrived, and he didn't just bring soldiers. He brought a Hungarian engineer named Orban and the largest monsters the world had ever seen. Orban had offered his services to the Byzantines first, but they couldn't afford him. So he went to the Sultan and made a promise. I can cast a cannon that could blast the walls of Babylon itself. The result was the basilic, a bronze cannon 27 feet long. It was so heavy it took 60 oxen to pull it and 200 men to keep it from tipping over. It could fire a 1,500-pound stone ball over a mile. Imagine you are a guard on top of those invincible walls. You've spent your life believing these stones are eternal. Suddenly, you see a flash on the horizon. A few seconds later, a sound hits you. A roar so loud it feels like the sky is tearing open. Then, the very earth beneath your feet shudders. A 1,500-pound rock slams into the masonry, and for the first time in 1,000 years, the dust clears to reveal a hole. This wasn't just a hole in a wall. It was a hole in the entire social order of the Middle Ages. You see, for centuries, the knight was the king of the battlefield. Why? Because a knight could afford expensive armor and a castle. If things got tough, he just went inside his castle and waited. The castle was the ultimate reset button for power. Gunpowder deleted that button. When the walls of Constantinople crumbled, every lord in Europe felt a cold shiver down their spine. If the greatest walls in Christendom couldn't stop a cannon, then no castle was safe. The era of the feudal lord was over. If you wanted to survive, you needed a central state, a government big enough and rich enough to afford its own cannons and the massive amounts of gunpowder needed to feed them. But there was a problem. Cannons were great for knocking down walls, but they were terrible for everything else. They were slow, they exploded frequently, and you could only fire the basilic about 7 times a day because the metal got so hot it would melt itself. To really take over the world, gunpowder needed to get smaller. It needed to go from something that required 60 oxen to something a single, terrified teenager could carry into a muddy field. This transition from the wall breaker to the man-killer happened in the shadows of the European forge. Blacksmiths, who had spent centuries perfecting church bells, realized that if you could cast a bell to hold sound, you could cast a tube to hold an explosion. They started making handguns, basically small iron pipes on sticks. They were clumsy, they were inaccurate, and half the time they'd blow the user's hand off. But they did something that a bow and arrow never could. They pierced plate armor. Think about the human tragedy of this. A knight spends 20 years training in the art of the sword, wears a suit of armor that costs as much as a small farm and represents chivalry and honor. Then, a peasant who has had 2 hours of training pulls a trigger. A lead ball flies out of a dirty tube, and the knight is gone. It was the great equalizer. By the end of the 15th century, the dragon from the east had been successfully caged in European iron. The walls were down, the knights were obsolete, and the power was shifting from local lords to massive, gunpowder-hungry empires. But as these empires grew, they realized they had a massive supply chain issue. They had the cannons, they had the men, but they were running out of the white salt that made it all work. Imagine standing on a beach in the late 1400s. You've spent your whole life in a world where the ocean is an end point, a vast, terrifying nothing. Then, a shape appears on the horizon. It's a ship, but it looks different from anything you've ever seen. It's bristling with dark, iron teeth poking out from its sides. Those teeth were the final piece of the gunpowder puzzle. Back in Chapter 3, we saw how cannons destroyed the idea of the castle. But on land, those cannons were still massive, heavy, and a nightmare to move through the mud. On a ship, however, the ocean does the heavy lifting for you. You could pack 20, 40, or eventually 100 cannons onto a single vessel. You weren't just building a ship anymore. You were building a floating, mobile fortress that could project power thousands of miles away from its home. This is the birth of the Gunpowder Empire. The Portuguese, the Spanish, and later the Dutch and the British realized that if you had the most cannons and the best black powder, you didn't need a massive army to conquer a continent. You just needed to control the ports. A single ship anchored in a harbor could hold an entire city hostage. The negotiation wasn't done with diplomats. It was done with the smell of sulfur and the roar of a broadside. But as these empires expanded, they hit a wall. And it wasn't a stone wall, it was a chemical one. To keep these floating fortresses firing, you needed an astronomical amount of gunpowder. And to make gunpowder, you needed saltpeter. We've touched on this before, but in the 16th and 17th centuries, saltpeter became the most strategically important substance on Earth. It was the lithium or oil of its day. Without it, your empire was just a collection of very expensive wooden boats and paperweights. Because saltpeter, potassium nitrate, is created by the breakdown of organic matter, the race to find it turned, well, disgusting. In England and France, the government appointed saltpeter men. These were men with a legal license to be the most hated people in the country. They had the right to enter your home, your stable, or your cellar and dig up the dirt. Why? Because they were looking for efflorescence, that white, salty crust that forms where animal or human waste has soaked into the soil and fermented for years. Imagine sitting down for dinner and having government officials tear up your floorboards because they think your basement has enough nitrogen to help them fight a war in the Caribbean. This was the human cost of empire that doesn't make it into the history books. Your very home was a resource for the state's fire drug. Eventually, even digging up floorboards wasn't enough. The demand was too high. the empires turned their eyes toward India. In the soil of the Ganges Valley, saltpeter occurred naturally in massive quantities. This is one of the hidden reasons the British East India Company was so obsessed with controlling India. It wasn't just about the tea or the spices. It was about the white gold. India became the world's gunpowder factory. By controlling the source of the nitrate, Britain essentially held the kill switch for the rest of the world's navies. But while the Europeans were busy perfecting the big guns on their ships, something else was happening. The gunpowder was finally getting small enough to fit into a person's hands. Enter the musket. At first, muskets were a joke. They were heavy, they took forever to load, and if it rained, they were useless. A skilled archer could fire 10 arrows in the time it took a musketeer to fire once. But here's the cold, hard logic of the gunpowder empire. It takes 10 years to train a master archer. It takes 2 weeks to train a peasant to point a tube and pull a trigger. The human element of skill was being replaced by the industrial element of mass production. War was becoming a numbers game. How many muskets can you build? How much saltpeter can you harvest from the dirt of India? How many ships can you keep supplied with black powder? As the 1700s dawned, the world was no longer a collection of isolated kingdoms. It was a global web of trade routes, all held together by the threat of an explosion. The spark that started in a Chinese alchemist lab was now lighting up the night sky over every ocean on the planet. But we were still using black powder, the same basic recipe from the 9th century. It was smoky, it was weak, and it left a thick white fog over every battlefield. To get to the modern world, we needed a new kind of bang. Don't forget to subscribe for more update Brew lore.